remarks tonight will be very brief. Essentially, I'd like to share with you a few of my priorities for the coming year. As you know, I hold very strongly to the belief that a progressive city government has got to function on two levels. First, we have got to deal as best we can with the day-to-day problems and concerns which affect our citizens, while we strive to make certain that our taxpayers' dollars are spent as wisely and as cost-effectively as possible. We have got to have the best police department and the best fire department, the best library and the best park system, and all the other amenities that the people of this city deserve. And to be frank with you, I think that we are making rapid progress in many of these areas. Our streets and sidewalks are being rebuilt. Our sewer system is being rebuilt. We are moving ahead rapidly in creating a people-oriented waterfront. Our economic development programs, our housing programs, our youth programs, our women's programs, our cultural programs, our solid waste programs are becoming models for the state of Vermont, and on occasion are literally becoming models that are being emulated around New England and, in fact, around the United States of America. And therefore, I think we have much to be proud of in terms of what we as a city are accomplishing today in trying to respond to the legitimate needs and concerns of our citizens. And I want to take this opportunity to thank the commissioners and the department heads and the city employees, members of my administration, and you who are on the Board of Aldermen, who certainly put in your hours for your $10 a week in making the effort that has resulted in the progress that I think is taking place within our city. But there is also another whole area that we, in my view, must have the courage to face. And those are a whole series of issues that, in fact, go beyond the immediate day-to-day crises and the immediate problems that come before us every week and come on before my desk virtually every day. And the reason that we as a local government have got to debate certain issues that some may argue are beyond our sphere, the reason that, in my view, we have got to do it is that if we don't do it, I'm afraid that nobody else is going to do it. The most important issue that we as a nation face is not the nuclear arms race and the possibility of nuclear war, or the fact that kids throughout this country and throughout the world go to sleep every night and have nightmares about whether or not they're going to wake up in the morning. And it's not, in fact, the gross inequality in terms of the distribution of wealth and income that exists in our country, or the fact that the wealthiest people are getting richer while the poor are getting poorer. And it's not the fact that our fragile environment is being subjected to assaults that may result in its not surviving in terms of the destruction of the ozone layer, or the impact of nuclear energy or acid rain. And it's not the fact that 800 million people in this world today are facing starvation. And it's not the fact that the media, the radio, the television, the newspapers, and the magazines in America are increasingly being owned by fewer and fewer large corporations who will tell us what is important and what is not important. And it's not the fact that, despite the fact that we are spending as a nation 10% of our gross national product in health care, that 32 million Americans today no longer have any health insurance at all, neither public or private, and are vulnerable today to any illness which will force them to go to a hospital that can deplete their entire life savings or put them in debt for the rest of their life. All of these issues, and many more, are important issues. But there is one issue even more important than all of these issues, and that is that in many respects there is a conspiracy of silence in terms of, in fact, open debate and discussions about all of these issues and many more issues. And one of those issues that I intend to bring before you during the coming year, until you're very tired of hearing about it, is the issue of the affordability of health care in our city, in our state, and in our nation. And we're going to raise it in ways that perhaps nobody else in this country are raising those issues. We talk over and over again about the problems, about health insurance going up. And as all of you know, since I've been mayor in the last 6 years, the health insurance budget for the city of Burlington has gone up by over 4 times. 6 years ago it was $250,000. Today, despite the fact that we are negotiating vigorously with our health insurance carrier, we're spending over $1 million a year. All over the country, this is the process that's going on. And somewhere, someplace, some people are going to have to raise the basic issues of whether health care is just another business that people are allowed to get rich on. It's okay for IBM to say our goal is to make as much money as is possible, or for GE, that's what we expect out of a private corporation. But somewhere, someplace, somebody is going to have to say that when elderly people are scared to death of being ill because they can't afford to go to a doctor or a hospital, is it acceptable that there are physicians in our community who are making hundreds of thousands of dollars off of people's illness? And somebody is going to have to ask the question whether, in fact, you have, quote-unquote, nonprofit institutions up there on the hill in which people are becoming very, very wealthy. Now, those are the issues that, for a variety of reasons, people don't want to talk about. They're not nice issues to talk about. We talk about all the schemes and the cost containment programs that we can develop. But I think at some point we're going to have to bring the issues down back home and make them very basic, and talk about the morality, if you like, of certain people getting rich off the illness of other people. You know, we have a very fine fire department and we have a very fine police department. And if there's a fire in somebody's house and our fire department goes out and sees a child in a room where there's a fire, our firemen are prepared at a moment's notice to go out and put their lives on the line to save that child and that family. And we don't go to that family and quickly negotiate a contract and say, what's your child worth? Worth $50,000 or $100,000 for our Burlington Fire Department to go up there and rescue that kid and save that life? What's it worth to you to have our police department respond to an emergency call? You want a quick negotiation? What is your life worth? And I think at some point we're going to have to raise that exact issue with the medical establishment. And we're going to have to say it ain't right and it's not fair that human lives are being calculated in dollars, and that people are going to have to come up with $10,000 for an operation in order to subsidize people who are already rich a dozen times over. These are issues that no one likes to discuss. They really don't. These are one of the many issues that I think somebody has got to have to discuss, and I suggest that it may as well be us. Thank you very much. First of all, thank you for coming. And how is Bunkers doing? That is.
You got it on. You have the Bunkers.
Okay. I would like to continue the discussion today that we began last week regarding the issue of how we can provide affordable health care to the citizens in our area. Today, however, I want to raise some very specific thoughts and tell you one direction that my administration intends to pursue in this area. There is a crisis in this country, in our state, and in our community regarding the affordability of health care. I think there are very few citizens who do not understand this and who are not deeply concerned about the skyrocketing costs of health care. The manifestations of this crisis are quite clear. Many of our citizens are no longer able to afford health insurance, and they either refuse to go to the doctor when they need to, or if they have to go to a hospital, they stand the possibility of running up a huge bill and facing financial ruin. For those people who do have health insurance, the cost of that health insurance is so high that for those of them on limited incomes, their insurance policies consume a very significant part of their income. For Burlington City Government, as one example, the cost of our health insurance program for city employees, which is paid for, of course, by Burlington taxpayers, has risen very dramatically over the last few years, and that also is the case for almost all private employers throughout health insurance programs as well. For the elderly, despite Medicare, on the national average, they are now paying 22% of their health care costs out of their own pocket. Many of the elderly live on fixed incomes and simply cannot afford that kind of expense. Ultimately, and this is the important point, after all is said and done regarding the debate over the cost of health care, there is one basic issue which has to be asked. And for a wide variety of reasons, it is amazing to me how rare that question is asked in the United States of America. And the question, of course, is not a complex question. It's a very simple question. On the national level, on the state level, and on the local level, is the health care really delivered, the health care that people need, really delivered in such a way as to provide the best quality care for our people at the lowest possible costs, as the medical profession tells us every other day? Or is the function of the medical establishment to make as much money and as large a profit as they possibly can for the higher-ups in that profession? Further, on the local level, are such organizations as the Medical Center Hospital of Vermont, which has a board of trustees dominated by wealthy individuals tied to the local big business community, and the University Health Center, whose chairman of the board coincidentally happens to be the general manager of the New England Telephone Company here in the state of Vermont, are these institutions, the Medical Center Hospital of Vermont and the University Health Center, are they really, quote-unquote, nonprofit institutions, or are they, in fact, successful and huge money-making operations through which physicians, administrators, drug companies, insurance companies, medical equipment suppliers, and others are getting rich, and in some cases, very rich? That ultimately is the basic issue. While such excellent organizations as the Visiting Nurses Association are struggling, financially struggling to provide home health care for the poor and the elderly, how many physicians in our area who utilize the quote-unquote nonprofit Medical Center Hospital of Vermont make $200,000 a year in income or more? We know how much the President of the United States makes. That's public knowledge. We know how much the Governor of the state of Vermont makes. That's public knowledge. We know how much the Mayor of Burlington makes. That's public knowledge. But how much do physicians make? How much do medical administrators make? And how can we deal with the whole question of the affordability of health care if we run away from that issue, which we so often do? Recently, as you know, I proposed that the Medical Center Hospital of Vermont match a $15,000 grant for the Visiting Nurses Association so that the VNA, that excellent provider of home-based health care, could receive a total of $30,000, a not insignificant sum of money. My understanding is that the Medical Center Hospital of Vermont has refused to make these funds available to the VNA, despite the fact that the VNA and the medical center, and this is an important fact that I think has not been brought out enough, despite the fact that the VNA and the medical center are both controlled by the same corporate umbrella organization with the same board of trustees, and that organization is called the Vermont Health Foundation. Further, I find it rather incredible that the Medical Center Hospital of Vermont, which in 1985 had a net income or profit of $7.9 million, and in 1986 had a net income or profit of $2.5 million, I find it rather incredible that this organization is unable to find $15,000 to help the VNA do the community work that it does so well. Ultimately, in the deepest sense, it seems to me that the question that must be debated in our community is a very fundamental one, and that is, should the practice of medicine and the whole healthcare system be run as a corporate business generating huge profits and incomes to the higher-ups in that profession, or should health care be a right to which all Americans are entitled at the lowest possible costs? And in order to pursue that discussion, I intend to appoint a task force to investigate just that question, to start exploring from a deep ethical question whether the practice of medicine, whether the delivery of health care should in fact be run as a corporate money-making operation in which sick people, elderly people, frail people are exploited because they are sick. Should medicine be run the same as we run automobile garages, where when we take our car that's broken down in and it gets repaired, sometimes mechanics try to charge us as much money as they can? The answer is, I don't think that we should. I think that health care is a human right that every American is entitled to, and I think that there is something very wrong with the system in which, out of human illness, out of human misery, some people are making large profits and large amounts of money. That is an issue, an ethical issue, that has not received the type of exploration and type of philosophical discussion that is required. And I think that's something that will generate here in the city of Burlington. Thank you.
Who's going to be on this task force?
That's going to take me several weeks to appoint the best people that we can.
Well, are you looking at city officials? Or
No, we're not looking at city officials. We're looking at people within our community, maybe outside of our community, maybe, in fact, bringing in people from Canada so that we can learn from our Canadian neighbors how they run their healthcare system, so that when people in Canada get sick, they don't have to worry about emptying out their bank account to go to the hospital. I think what we want to do is look, in fact, how other nations are dealing with the problem and raise the ethical questions that in our country and our community have not been raised very often.
So you might bring somebody from Canada. I mean, who's going to want to come down from Canada to work on this?
Well, we'll have to make that question, I think, but we'll have to find that out.
Can we be going to be a non-political or an apolitical task force?
It's going to be a task force which is going to ask some questions which very rarely in our capitalist society are in fact asked. And that is raising the ethical questions of some people making huge sums of money while other people cannot afford to go to the doctor or go to the hospital. And we'll be learning what other societies are doing in this world. As you may or may not know, the United States of America today is one of two nations in the entire world, and unfortunately we share the distinction with South Africa, in which we do not have a national health service. But these issues, the whole issue of what is proper in a democratic society in terms of the delivery of health care, that's an issue that I want to see debated in this city.
How many people are going to be on this task?
I really don't know the details yet. We will.
Do you know, are they just going to come up with a report at the end? Are they going to make specific recommendations to the Board of Aldermen or something like that? Or?
Yeah, I think, well, again, it's something that has to be worked on, but primarily it's an issue which is not being discussed, of course, any place in the state of Vermont. It's an issue that probably is hardly being discussed in the United States of America, and it has to be discussed.
Mayor, do you have evidence of even one citizen of the city of Burlington who's been denied medical treatment because of an inability to pay?
What I do know is that I do have evidence that when people go to the hospital, they are badgered to pay that bill for many, many years, and the bill is very high. And I also have evidence that there is no written or objective criteria as to how health care for the poor is done at the Medical Center Hospital of Vermont. Now, several years ago, I was up there speaking to the head of the hospital and saying, if somebody is a low-income person, what kind of discount is available to that person? Are people treated for free, and what is the criteria? What is the cutting off point? Is it $10,000? Is it $15,000? To the best of my knowledge, there is no written objective criteria which tells people what they can expect if they're low income at the hospital.
But we don't have a case of people saying, we're not going to treat you because...
I think, but what you do have is you do have people, certainly, and I have talked to many people, who cannot afford to go to the doctor or cannot afford to go to the hospital because they know that after the treatment is over, they're going to be paying off a many $1,000 bill, and those people often do not walk in to the hospital. So the real issue is, Do people get the type of health care that they need? And in many, many instances, they do not because they cannot afford the bill.
Hospital says they write off a couple of million a year.
Good. And then I would like you to go up there and you find out, well, that's good. Now, if you want a low-income housing loan in the city of Burlington, you can walk into the CEDO office and they will tell you exactly what your income has got to be to get that. I would challenge you to go up to the Medical Center Hospital of Vermont and say, tell me, at what income do people get free care so that we can advertise that? At what income do people get partial discounts? Now, I asked that question several years ago and was told that is a private decision. We make those decisions. That is not public knowledge. Very often when they calculate what they quote-unquote write off, what they're really talking about are bad debts. People who, for a variety of reasons, do not pay their bill. I suspect often skiers who are up here who are treated and then leave the area. Okay? And that is often written off as a charitable action on the part of the hospital. And I don't accept that. But the truth is, I think if you ask them, you're not going to get a specific answer.
One of the things I'd like to know is, you talk about the Board of Trustees and the wealthy individuals that are on it. One thing I'd like to know is what do you define as wealthy? What income level makes them wealthy? The second question is, in what sense, it seems like you're sort of implying that they're making a profit off this.
No, I didn't say that. No, I don't suspect that they are. I think, and we'll go into that. You know, one of the problems with this issue, it is a complex issue, and I don't intend to go into every aspect of it at the same time. But I think it would be worthy to examine who is on the Medical Center Hospital Board of Trustees, who is on the Vermont Health Foundation, and find, as you read the names, whether these are people who have been associated with making the fights for the rights of working people or elderly people or poor people, or whether in fact these are people whose reputation comes from being attached to large businesses which are primarily profit-making businesses. Now, I have nothing against these people personally, and this is not a personal attack. Okay? But I think it seems strange to me that when there are consumer-type advocates in the state of Vermont, people who have developed somewhat of a reputation fighting for the rights of the elderly and the poor, somehow those people don't seem to get on these boards of trustees. That the people who seem to get on these boards of trustees are part of a clique which keeps coming from the same group of people. Now, that would be worthy of an examination on the part of the media. We will help in that pursuit.
What about people like Dr. Luganville, who's the dean of the medical college? He's on the board of trustees. Is he not in a position to know?
Essentially, the point that I was making of the non-medical people. The non-medical people. If you look at the people who are on the board of trustees who are non-physicians, I think it does not take a genius. This is not a personal attack. It really is not. In other words, if you look at the University Health Center, okay, and you find out, okay, well, who's the fellow who happens to be the head of the board of trustees? I mean, just so happens to be the fellow who is the general manager of the Vermont New England Telephone Company. Does that make him an evil guy? Of course it doesn't.
So what? What does that have
Well,
to
that's
do?
the answer. The answer is so what, and I would trust that you understand what the answer should be. It is so what.
What is the answer?
What is the answer is that people whose whole background are based on making as much money as they can for their companies, I find it odd that those are the exact same people who are on a board of directors, which presumably now are trying to provide as affordable and as inexpensive health care as they possibly can. There seems to be an inconsistency.
Why? I don't understand.
You don't understand what?
I don't necessarily. I mean,
If you don't, Bob, then we really do have.
Well, not necessarily. Just because somebody's in a position to make money for their company doesn't mean that they don't give half their income to charity that you don't know, and doesn't mean that they can't sit there and make a decision about affordable.
Some of us hold the belief. Well, I know, and that is one of the problems in our society, you know, is that lack of understanding exists. If you have people who time and time again come from corporations where they are paid to make as much money as they can for their stockholders, who are basically profit-motivated people, doesn't make them evil people. But it does raise, I think, into question whether those people who are sitting at the heads of quote-unquote non-profit organizations are really going to be leading the fight in such areas as affordable health care. Okay?
So you're saying that their attitude is such about making money that when they get on the board of directors, they can't think of anything but making money for the hospital, essentially is what you're saying.
I think I've said what I you know, it's, yeah.
Mayor, after you come out with a press conference like this on the heels of last week's press conference where you make it very clear where you stand, you now say you're going to appoint a task force. Is there any doubt what conclusion a task force whose members you appoint, what conclusion they're going to come
But it's not, you know, it's not a task force, Stuart, that is going to raise or going to bring forth a specific ordinance in the city of Burlington. What I am trying to do here is to raise an issue and start a debate that has not taken place in the state of Vermont, and that takes place very, very rarely in this nation. See, in the United States of America, you have a nation which is dominated by big money and by major corporations. The medical establishment is part of that system. And very rarely are you going to see people outside of that system sit down and say, let's take a look objectively at the delivery of health care. We spend 10% of our gross national product on the delivery of health care in this nation, and yet we have millions of Americans who have no health insurance, people who are frightened to death about going to the hospital. You have doctors who are making hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars in profits. You have drug companies that live off people's illness and make billions of dollars in profits. Now, who is raising that question about the ethics, the morality of that particular system? Let me give you an example. And I raised this the other day in some remarks I made here in Burlington. We have in the city of Burlington an excellent fire department, an excellent police department, as does every city in the United States of America. They have fire departments and police departments. If in 5 minutes the alarm went off and our fire department raced out to somebody's home, okay, and there they observed parents on the outside in a home that was burning, and they were pointing up to the second floor of the home and said, my children are up there, go save them, or else they're going to die. Do you think that the Burlington Fire Department would sit down and say, well, actually, how much is it worth to you? How much are your kids worth? How much is the life of your child worth? $50,000 or $100,000? Quick, cite it. And yet, if you stop for a moment and you talk about the delivery of health care in this country, to a large degree, that's exactly what the issue is. You're sick. You need some desperate health care. How much is it worth to you? Do you have the $50,000 for that operation? Do you have the $300 for that checkup at the physician's office? Is that what human life is about? That it has to be saved by the amount of money that we put into it? We don't do that in Burlington. All right? Our firefighters make $20,000 a year, $25,000 a year. They are prepared to put their lives on the line in order to save people. All right? They don't make hundreds of thousands of dollars in salary. And I think these are the type of ethical questions that have got to be asked, that have almost never been asked. And I understand there's a lot of confusion about this issue because it is never discussed. You know, as you know, here in the city of Burlington, we have been concerned about the skyrocketing cost of our own health insurance programs for the last many years, and we deal with the insurance companies. We put as much pressure as we can on them. And we deal with, I think, sophisticated cost containment policies, trying to discourage our workers from abusing the system. But nobody asks some basic questions. Okay? Is it proper when you're dealing with life and death programs, whether people live or die, whether they get the health treatment that they need or not, that out of that whole process, there are people who are getting rich on human illness and human suffering?
Okay. Just to, is your task force going, is this debate going to include people who don't agree with you?
Yes, I think it would. I would love to, yes. Yes, we certainly would. We certainly will. I want to see that debate. And I want people to come forward and say, yeah, I have the right to make $300,000 a year as a health care practitioner. And there goes our fire department. They're not going to be charging $50,000. I am saying here's the point. Well, we know.
Are you saying that that's what they're doing?
I am saying that I would suspect that there are people who are making several $100,000 a year.
But are they being badgered and saying, we're not going to operate on you until you sign on?
What I am saying is that if they go to the hospital and if they are treated, then they are certainly going to be billed to Kingdom Come in order to pay back that bill. Of course that's the case. Of course that's the case. Now, in some instances, to the best of my knowledge, the hospital may well say, you don't have a lot of money, we're going to cut your bill in half. Or maybe you don't have a lot of money, we're not going to charge you. I'm not going to say that that doesn't go on. But to the best of my knowledge, there is no written set of specifications which will tell low-income people that their care is free, that their care is discounted. To the best of my understanding, that is an absolutely arbitrary decision that the hospital will make. They may give you a break, they may not give you a break. Okay, and that seems to be wrong. Absolutely wrong. Okay? Just as it would be wrong for the city of Burlington to say, you want low-interest loans on a housing improvement program? Fine, we'll give it to you, but we're not going to give it to you. Okay, we publish what our specifications are, and we try to deal with these things objectively.